Hit record.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to the truth about living at home as we age. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Paige Fairbanks-Gunn, and I work for Kelsch Senior Communities. And I've been with the company about almost 14 years. I've been in the industry in senior housing since 1997. I'm in the Arizona region, and we have independent living communities, assisted living, and we also have memory care communities as well. I want you to utilize these webinars to utilize Pam and I as a resource. We're here to help you. So feel free to, it's very informal. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. We will go over those. And of course, I have Pam, my co-host here, and she is the National Caregiving Speaker and Consultant of Alzheimer's Family Consulting. She's a certified senior advisor, also a certified dementia practitioner, a certified in dementia care. She's also the author of the highly rated It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey, which is based on Pam's 14-year dementia and Alzheimer's caregiving journey for her parents. So we always love to have Pam with us. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Paige. I appreciate the introduction. And, Paige and I were talking about what it is we do and how we can get more people just like yourself to reach out to us. And we thought, maybe they think that we're experts and that we have lofty ambitions. But in reality, we both decided we're actually lifesavers. Just like the candy, we help you get through the toughest parts of whatever decisions you're having to make as either you or your loved one ages. And so that's why I wrote It's Not That Simple, because my parents' plan was to die in their sleep, to have Medicare and TRICARE for Life pay for all their medical expenses, have access to a car at all times, and my parents lived into their 90s, and to die in their sleep. So no medical issues, none of that stuff. And so it's that didn't happen. Just in case you haven't heard my story before, it didn't happen in any way. None of those things actually happened the way they were supposed to. So Paige and I thought that it would be a good idea to talk about this topic because it's a delicate one. So Paige, out of curiosity, what's your plan? Have you talked to your kids about like, hey, when I get old, I'm moving in with you? Or what are you thinking of as far as your plan goes?
My plan so far, my husband and I just finished up our advanced directives. I'm going to be 50 this year. My husband is 53. So we just finalized our trust and our advanced directives along with our living will, healthcare, and also in Arizona, for those of you that are in Arizona, you need to have the mental health care power of attorney. So I'm very happy to have that all finalized, notarized, and it's finally done. And it's funny because I sent it to my brother. So I had it, my husband and I are each other, of course. And then our adult son he's 27, and he'll be, our alternate, then our daughter, hopefully as time goes on, because they're very young. And I sent it to my brother who's 55, and I said, hey, Parker, I have you as kind of a very last case backup. And I sent it to him, and he's like, I sent him all the documents. He's like, wow, you have all this done? Like, why? And I'm like, because I said, we have a family and you have a family, and you just never know. I mean, for those of you that have ever heard of the Terry Schiavo case, that case from years ago, where she did not have her advanced directives and she was on a feeding tube for many, many, many years. It's one of those things that, we don't really think about. But because I'm in the industry and I work with so many families, it scared the bejesus out of me that I'm like, I got to get this stuff done because you just never know. Right. So we have ours done. How about Pam? I know you have yours.
Well, yeah, I've had.
You're working on it. It's your to-do list.
Oh, no, I've had it done since I was 25 because my parents made me do it for them. And then I got married and I was like, okay, I don't trust him to make a decision for me.
Right. Yeah, so no kidding.
I want everything in writing so anybody can read it. But more importantly, when I think about aging in place, which is the official term for staying at home for as long as you can. And I don't know if you guys see those Life Alert commercials. But this one woman's like, you're gonna have to carry me out, feet first before I would move to someplace else. And it's like, wow, that's an interesting image. So for me, like I just bought a house in Colorado that is 4 stories, 3 sets of stairs. And everybody who knows that I've had 2 ACL reconstructions thinks I'm crazy. And I said, no, it's really good for my legs and staying in shape, keeping up the cardio. I just have to go up and down the stairs. And then, I said, and this isn't my long-term plan. I'll stay in this house for probably another 5 years, depending on the market, and sell when it's good, and then move into a 1 story, probably a condo, probably something where I don't have to shovel snow. I don't have to mow the lawn. I can just, the dog will have a yard. And so that's kind of my hope. Now, I don't know if that's all going to go down that way, but that's the hope. And I think that's one of the reasons we started to talk about this and thought people could benefit from it, is that we all hope that we live forever and we're healthy. There's this thing called there's life expectancy. That's the one that everybody hears. Oh, live till I'm 83, or I'm going to live until I'm 90. And in reality, like my mom, the way I describe it is that she lived till she was 77. Her healthy life expectancy, HLE, was 77. And the last 14 years of her life were spent in the world of dementia, and the expensive world of dementia, and not driving. And on certain occasions when the disease would really plummet her capabilities, there was someone feeding her. And then she would recover and she'd be able to eat, finger foods on her own, or use her fork for everything. So we really don't know what the future holds. And I know we say that a lot, but you have an aunt who recently moved to the Phoenix area from Kansas. How did she make that decision? How did she say, oh, I want to live near Paige?
Well, my aunt in Kansas, she is 76, and we are very, very close. My mom died when I was 14, so her and I have been very, very close. It's my mother's sister. And we've been very close, and she's just so far away. And I made the move to Arizona 18 years ago. And so me coming back to see her, it was great. However, with my work and travel, I really wanted her to be closer to me, and she really wanted to. We wanted to be together. So she said, I really need to get out there before, something happens to me and I can't make the move. Doctor's appointments are getting a little bit more complicated. Driving and things like that were becoming a little bit more complicated. Wichita was starting to grow, and, a lot more population coming in. And so I think as she was getting older, it happened to my dad too. The older he was getting, it was just a little bit more anxious and things like that on the road. So we decided to add together. This was her decision. And of course, I helped her. She moved to our independent living at the park at Copper Creek in Chandler, fully independent living. It was a major downsize for her, but for her, she was excited about it because she's like, I don't want to deal with all this stuff. She had already downsized from a 4,000 square foot home to 1,800. And then she went 1,800 and then went to 800. But it's nice because she doesn't have to, she brought her car. My husband and I drove her car here and she flew here. She doesn't have to do any driving if she doesn't want to, because the park provides concierge services and we have mobile physicians. She doesn't have to worry about cooking, although she has a full kitchen. She can handle that if she wants. And we do her housekeeping. We have the physician there available. And she's a very social person. Not everybody's social, but she's a pretty social person. So she came in, we brought her in New Year's Eve. So she really came in January 1st of this year. and she's still settling in. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. She's like, it is totally different. And she moved states. So but she says, I really do like it. And I'm glad that I'm close to family. And I'm actually really enjoying kind of being catered to. She likes that part of it. She's like, I don't have to cook and clean. And she played bunco on Saturday, and she was playing mahjong, learning how to play mahjong with some of the other ladies. So, and she's 76. So I think that her being in that type of environment, I think is really going to be very beneficial for her socially and also health wise. And I think she's going to live longer and healthier because of it.
Yeah. Well, and they actually have done research that says that moving into a community environment, not necessarily senior living community, but an environment where people are checking on you or at least asking you, hey, how you doing? Is definitely helps you live a healthier, longer life. And the key
Yes.
here is living a long time is really not the goal, guys. It's being healthy, both mentally and physically. And when you do have, because stuff happens, right? So here I am in this 4-level house, and I get a bone spur in my big toe, and I have surgery. So saws, don't anybody get sick, saws down the bone, it cuts open my toe and saws down the bone spur. And now I have to figure out, well, how am I going to get home from the hospital? And then, because I just moved here, I don't know a lot of people. And then groceries I got before, but of course you always forget something. And fortunately, my neighbors are angels, and they're like, oh, do you need anything? Like the one neighbor, took out the trash. It snowed, of course. And one of my other neighbors, shoveled my sidewalk. And so it's nice to have that. But you know what? The other thing is, we're not good about asking for help. We're not good at being vulnerable. So I think there's that as well. So I asked people to type in 1 if you're worried about moving into a senior living community, and enter a 2 if you're not. And thank you, Gloria, for responding. Okay, guys, there's 18 others of you there that need to type in a 1 or a 2 for us, please. But what I wanted to do, Paige, if you're cool with it, is I wanted to share what a care community actually looks like. Because I think it's our number one fear. And it's a matter of how do we look at where we might move to. Now, in my perspective is, I don't think about it as moving to a senior community. I think of it as moving to an apartment, right? I'm paying rent. Rent happens to include, it's room and board, right? So, and cleaning, and I have my own kitchen. So here, I wanted to show you guys what assisted and senior care looks like. So you can see this fancy one on the left. I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. But you can see this breakfast bar, and it's a full kitchen. There's a refrigerator, sofas, chairs. And then this one on the right is a different layout. And it's got the microwave, the oven, the dishwasher, and the refrigerator and everything. So it's not like you're giving up everything. And in a lot of cases, you get to choose your space. I mean, the sooner you let people know, the community know what kind of space you want, you get on a wait list. So I took this from Kelch Community's website, just a heads up. So here's 700 square feet. So you've got a bedroom, you've got a balcony, you've got your walk-in closet, you've got laundry if you decide you need to do laundry, but there's also a laundry service that's included. You've got a full bath, walk-in closet, walk-in bath, shower. You've got a kitchen, and then you've got a living space. There's a fireplace, and there's a walkout balcony. So there's, for 700 square feet, that's a nice size for one person. My parents were in a 2-bedroom that I believe, I don't remember how many square feet. It was at least 1,100 square feet. And that's what this is. This is 2 bedrooms. You'll see one on each side with the closets. And then, by the way, there's also 2 baths. So 2 bedroom, 2 bath. big kitchen, big seating area, again, a fireplace, and then the walkout balcony. And so I wanted to be sure, when we talk about this, that we're very clear that we're not sticking you in a box where you basically have a bed and a toilet, because that's just not the case, right, Paige?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Speaking, okay, go
It's
ahead.
like
Sorry.
resort. I mean, it's like a landlocked cruise ship.
Docked luxury cruise
It's a
liner.
docked luxury cruise ship. Yeah, absolutely.
So check out this dining room. All right, it's fancy. And then they do have bistros and casual areas too. But again, I'll tell you what, when this is over, when this webinar is over and we all shut down, the first question I'm going to ask myself is, what's for dinner? And I'll tell you, on days like today, I would like to walk down the hallway, be handed a menu and a glass of wine, and say, here's your seat. And it doesn't mean that you have to sit with people either. If you don't want to converse, find a place that's quiet and enjoy it. But again, linens, and it's a fine dining experience, but you can eat in your own little dining room if you want. You don't have to go to the dining room. You can fix something in your own area.
There's our guys.
Yeah. So this table at the top here, these guys did a webinar for us, and I sent it to you last month, where they talked about why they moved into independent living. And, a couple of the gentlemen had lost their spouse. Actually, all three had lost their spouses, and they were kind of feeling like they were losing it mentally, and that they were really sad, and that they needed, something uplifting, an environment that was uplifting. And this gentleman right here, I asked him, I said, well, do you enjoy socializing? And he said, no, not really. He's like, I like to be around people, but I also want to, I go into the library, I have my earbuds on, and I sit and I relax, and I enjoy the fountain, and I don't talk to anybody. And so it's important to realize that this is not regimented. This is not you're not being forced to do anything when you're in independent and assisted living. And so whether you enjoy your cocktails with friends, whether you want to dance and party, or whether you just want to sit here and have a cup of coffee with some people and chit chat about the day's events, it's all up to you. I couldn't resist. Now this is making me really hungry.
We always have steak and salmon on the menu.
Yes, and look at that asparagus. That looks wonderful. And then some tomatoes. Anyway, so I'll at least I didn't post the desserts, you guys. So this is actually, so you've eaten and you want to wear off a few calories. You can play cards, you can play pool, rack them and stack them. You have other things to do. And I wanted to make sure that this was clear, that this is when people talk about, oh, well, I'm not going to a home. Well, no, you're not, because a home is short for a skilled nursing facility, where there are nurses 24/7 there to take care of people who need care 24/7. This is an apartment building. It's an apartment building. So look at these bedrooms. I thought these are beautiful. Honestly, when my mom and my dad and I were touring communities, and I told my mom, I said, they do your laundry, they cook for you, they clean. You have 1,100 square feet to get away from dad. And she giggled. And I said, I want to move in here. And the person who was touring us said, you're not old enough yet. So, it's pretty luxurious. And then in Phoenix, Paige, tell us how hot it is right now.
Oh, yes. Just to let you know where I am right now. Yep, it is 100 degrees today, and it is March. It's crazy. The temps are going up, and people's air conditionings are starting to fire off, and we have them on. It is on, and it is warm.
Yeah. So that brings us to, what would you do? And it doesn't matter where you are in the country. Let's be honest. It can be, 70% humidity in Wisconsin and 92 degrees. So, if you wanted to exercise, you couldn't go outside for a walk. It's too hot. You're not going to want to get in your car because it's too hot. So you can do exercises in the gym. Every care community has some sort of gym facility. And if that's something you want to entertain, be sure to ask that question when you're checking them out.
And we
And of
also have,
course,
Pam, we have therapists on site. Most of your independent senior communities, the independent living and most assisted do offer have physical therapists on site as well.
therapy, which is always good because you know what? My shoulders get frozen and it would be so nice to have somebody work on them and then, go have ice cream or something.
Well, it's nice too, because if somebody, we've had a fair share of people that maybe they need to go in for a hip replacement or they've had a rotator cuff surgery or some sort of surgery, and maybe they are in the hospital for a little bit. They can come right back to their apartment and maybe skip over having to go to a skilled nursing rehab.
Oh, to a rehab. Yeah. Yucky. Because then you're amongst your stuff and your friends and you have 24/7, caregivers around if you need them. I mean, yeah, it seems like the way to go. The other thing I wanted to point out is you can bring a friend with fur. And, that's always a nice thing too. And then, like what you just said, when you need help, and honestly, we all need help, whether we've cut ourselves, whether we've tripped, twisted an ankle, have a bone spur in our big toe, whatever it might be, it's nice to have someone to help. And it's their job, right? So they're going to help you because they're going to be checking on you. Here's some bistro shots and some, just general living areas. So you're never stuck in one place or in a small place.
There's your mom.
There's my mom. Live your life your way. So there's my mom. That's what made me think of the heading because it was Thanksgiving and that's a turkey hat. And I didn't think she knew what it was. And sure enough, she knew what it was and she was putting it on her head. So, and then this woman over here is taking computer classes. And that's the other thing is that there's constant learning, constant classes going on. And what better way rather than driving to the community library and going to those courses or doing something online where you're not getting as much attention as you would like, having this as part of the community living is wonderful. And then these girls, they're doing the selfie and they're having a great time. So I wanted to just share and make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about. Aging in place. I don't have gym equipment. I have to cook for myself. I have to do my own laundry. I have to do all that stuff. And if I want groceries, I could call Instacart, I suppose, but there's delivery fees and stuff. And, so I'm going to have to drive. So Eric said, can we please start the presentation? This is disrespectful. This is the presentation, Eric. So I'm sorry if you were thinking there was going to be a slide deck or something like that. That's not what we usually have conversations about what to do and how to do it. And this conversation is very specific to the truth about aging. And what we're talking about is how people deal with it. How, what are your options? So Paige, in that respect, let's start talking about some of the things we promised, which is the 3 factors to consider when aging in place. So the first one is getting around. Let's talk about that a bit, Paige.
So getting around the house in the neighborhood, how are we getting around the house? Are you ambulatory on your own? Do you happen to have a walker or a cane? Making sure that you are safe in your own home. We all know that everybody wants to stay in their home. And of course, that is the goal. But do you want to make sure that it's safe, that you're able to maneuver around? And then also, how are you getting around in the neighborhood? I know a lot of retirement communities. My in-laws, my mother-in-law is going to be 81 and they're in a housing retirement community and there's a lot of golf carts. So they like to do golf carting around and making sure that they're able to get around in the neighborhood. And then also stores, how are you able to get around in the store? Are you ambulatory? Making sure you're safe if you have an independent assistive device to keep you independent, making sure that you're able to get around okay. And then, of course, the desire to do tasks. How I know I don't want to do laundry and cooking, but I've seen what it can be like in retirement communities. So I told my husband I'm ready to go when we're ready. And that's going to be sooner rather than later for me because I don't want to cook and clean. But if you are at home, how is that going at home? The laundry, making sure that you've got, the cooking and the cleaning and all that stuff. It's a lot to do. We have one of our ladies that moved in, independent, and she's very independent. She's 90. She was still doing all this stuff. And she's so happy that she moved in because she was like, I'm so glad that I don't have to do this anymore. It gives me more time to be able to, do the things I want to do. And she's able to go to the oil painting classes, and she's able to go to the theater and some of the outings and we do a lot of outings and shopping and stuff. So those types of things.
So Paige, let me interrupt you for just a second because there's been some comments in the chat about, well, what if I have dementia and do I have to move to a different type of community? And what the idea behind this webinar was really to talk about the truth of the and I almost called it the myth. And then I thought that's not fair to the people who do want to age at home. But the bottom line is that we all will at some point in time need physical or assistance with being able to do daily tasks. And, we know people who are sharp as a tack at 90, but have, issues with getting around. And so it really comes down to your individual decisions and documenting, which Paige brought out at the very beginning, documenting what it is that you want to do, and then to use professionals as a way to get down that path so that it's not a surprise. Because trust me, my mother thought she was fine. She just stopped cooking for my father. And he had to pick up and say, okay, well, I don't know how to cook. I can cook soup and cereal, and that's about it. So what's your plan if that were to happen? Because as we lose capacity as part of dementia, we're not necessarily conscious of the fact that we're losing that ability. And so knowing that you have a plan, the truth about aging in place is that you need to have what we talked about in the landing page, the registration page, is a plan B, right? Because plan A, go for it. I hope that you're able to live in the best environment possible, with people around you that are going to care for you. But the question is that going to be a reality? So, we need to talk about, more about living at home. Yes. So I want to address something really quick. Living at home is literally the title of the webinar. No, the title of the webinar is The Truth About Living at Home as We Age. Okay, so it's really important because I know a bunch of people are like, what's the deal here? And the bottom line is we are telling you the truth. We are representing your options. One is to stay at home. So my question to you, audience, is what is it that you want to know about the truth about living at home? Because it's going to be different for every single person on this webinar, right? So, okay. So Krista asked a great question.
This is a good
what
question,
if you can't
Krista.
afford these places? So, Paige, I'll hand that off to you since I've been talking for a bit.
And Krista, that's a great question. There's a huge spectrum of different options. So there's, of course, if you want to go into a senior housing community, just a regular independent living community, they range anywhere from about $2,500 to up to $5,500. It really depends on what you're looking for, how many services you want. So it is, senior housing is a private pay, is private pay. But there are other options to help pay for that. There is VA aid in attendance that might be available to seniors, that if they need certain types of assistance with activities of daily living that can help. There's also Medicaid programs out there all over the United States that can help with limited access to funds over, as far as, limited care options as well. So it really is a spectrum. If someone goes into assisted living, or if they need memory care, it gets much higher. I mean, assisted living ranges anywhere from about 4,500 to about 8,500. And memory care, dementia care communities range anywhere from about 5,500 to about 12,000. Again, that's a huge range, but it also depends on, are you doing a companion setting in assisted living, or are you in a private setting? How much care are you getting? How much care do you require? There's all sorts of different levels. And every community usually has, well, every community has to do an assessment. So if you're looking at options for the future, or for a parent, or for yourself, the best course of action is to get an assessment done from a clinical nurse, to give you an idea of what you're looking at as far as, for the future, if you need care. Hopefully that's a long answer, but it's a spectrum.
Right. Well, there's other options too. So you don't have
There is absolutely other
So
options.
here's the thing. If you live at home and you need a caregiver to come in, there's agencies which are licensed and monitored. So they're going to be a little bit more expensive because they require, those licenses are expensive. Or you can find a friend of a friend who will come in and check on you and help you out when you see fit. Anyway, you want to look at it with today's pricing, it's somewhere between $35 and $50 an hour, depending on the amount of care you need. The other thing is, these people typically want to work at least a 4-hour shift, if not a 6 or an 8-hour shift. And then the question is, how often do you need to see them? So, Eric, to your point, the truth about living at home is very individual, and even very individual to the point of finances. It's not as simple as saying, well, this is the way to go, or that's the way to go. Because here's the thing, we don't know how much money everyone has. So the question is, and so I can tell you, with memory care, if you age at home with memory care assistance, with caregiver assistance, that typically can run anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a year, depending on your mobility. So if you need 2 caregivers to come in and help you get around, that's the $200,000 a year. And that's one of the reasons we were talking about showing you what a real care community looks like, because I bet you 80% of the people here have not ever stepped foot in one to see what it looks like, or what it feels like, or had dinner in one, or lunch. And if you have, that's fantastic. You're one step ahead of everyone else. But if you think that staying at home is less expensive than going into a community, and you need care, you need a caregiver, you need to evaluate that. And that's why Plan B is so important, is, what if I can't stay at home because I can't afford to? So there's also reverse mortgages, right? Or home equity lines of, or not home equity lines, home equity conversion mortgages. So there's a whole finance side of this that can provide you with money from taking the equity out of your home. So it's literally a reverse mortgage they're paying you. But that's basically going to keep you in care at home. When you sell the house, the bank gets that equity back, and then whatever's left is left. But if you're a couple, that works out well, because now you have equity from your home paying the bills for your spouse if they need to go to memory care, and you still have your home. They can't take your home away from you. So that's one way to finance things if you own your own home. And so there's a lot of different options.
There's a lot of options too, Pam. A girlfriend of mine, her aunt was able to, there's long-term care insurance, which for those of you on the call, sooner rather than later, if you're looking at longevity of living longer and, want that, that support down the road for financial is long-term care insurance. But my girlfriend's aunt was 74 and she was able to get a long-term care insurance policy, not fully, but she was able, not a full 100% for 5 years or unlimited. They don't do unlimited, but she was able to get a $200,000 long-term care insurance policy. Cost her about $5,500 a year. And then she actually needed it, and she's in assisted living and utilizing it right now. So there are small term policies that seniors can get. And then, of course, for the adult children, it's kind of a gamble. I mean, my husband's like, honey, my husband's 53 and he says, that's going to be $700 a month for who knows how long. And I said, well, we just don't know. That's the gamble of insurance. We don't know.
If you have an annuity, there's
services.
also death benefits and other benefits. While you're alive, you can still take that money back out. I mean, you guys need to talk to your financial advisors about that. It's not just long-term. It's not just insurance anymore. It's actually annuities that pay you, and it's complicated, which is the other reason we wanted to open the conversation about this versus everybody running around thinking that, oh, well, that's a nursing home and I'm going to age at place and it's black and white. It's not. It's many shades of gray. So, and Krista, I agree. I wrote in the statistics, 10,000 people are turning 65 every day by the end of 2030, actually 2029. 1 out of every 5 people will be 65 and over. You start doing the dementia, applying or overlaying the dementia statistics, where back in 2022, 1 out of 9 people was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. That's the people who were diagnosed, let alone the people who don't want to go to a neurologist or don't have medical insurance to go to a doctor, or just aren't mentally capable of even thinking that. And we have a situation on our hands. We do. And so this aging in place and aging at home, how are people who can't get out of bed in the morning and brush their teeth and fix a meal, how are they going to survive? And so that's the conundrum as far as looking at, a senior community versus, I mentioned it like a commune. This is what my girlfriends and I have been talking about, is we all find a single level environment, neighborhood, where we can hire one caregiver who can be occupied for 8 hours by spending 2 hours at each of our homes. We can do Instacart and do one grocery list and then have it distributed. There's lots of creative ways to look at how we can live. But when we actually, if I don't know when you guys all signed up, but if you notice, the title of the webinar changed from With Dementia, Living at Home with Dementia, to just Living at Home as We Age, because the problem is much bigger than just dementia. Dementia exacerbates the issue, but even just living at home from a mobility perspective makes it worse. So, I
have just Krista, just to kind of let you know, I have a my girlfriend both her parents are 83 and 84, and they both have terminal cancer. They're dead set on not going anywhere. And so I'm helping her they've decided not to go further treatment. So we've got them set up on hospice care, which hospice doesn't mean you're passing away right now. People can live on hospice for 1 year, 2 years. So I got her set up on hospice care, which that portion is covered by Medicare. They're not there all the time, but it's a supportive service. And then they're piecing together home care that's coming in. And then they found some, the home care agencies are pretty expensive, but then they also found 2 volunteers from their church that is helping come in the evenings and on the weekends. So they're kind of doing, they're doing like a trifecta with multiple services to try to keep mom and dad at home eventually. Eventually they may need to go into like a hospice inpatient, but they're going to try to keep them at home as long as possible. So it's just, there's a multitude of different services and how to piece it together. So that's what's going on with her parents. Just kind of give you an example.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge. And I don't know how
The
many
challenge.
who, I mean, we all have, this is the other dimension to this, is each and every person has the right to decide how they're going to pass. And,
Mhm.
your relatives are a perfect example of that. It's like, you know what? We both have terminal cancer. We're going to call it good. The other thing is there's, medical aid in dying states where they're helping people pass, comfortably. You mentioned hospice. My mom was on hospice 4 times.
Mhm.
And again, that's a great way to help someone rally. But the real question, that the call to action, not just for Paige and me, but for you as attendees and those listening, is what are we going to do if we're in situations like this where there's so many of us? So that means that the government or somebody has got to help step in. How are we going to afford aging? Nobody counted on the number of baby boomers. It's not like there was a surprise that there would be this many of us, 70 million or so. So what are we going to do? What's the plan? So this is really an open dialogue. We're not about presenting necessarily. We're about discussion and dialogue. So speaking of that, let's talk a bit about dementia and brain stimulation and sitting at home and watching TV, puttering around the house. Is that good for you, Paige?
No, no. Folks that have dementia, I work with a lot of caregivers. I have a gentleman that's on the webinar today, lovely gentleman that participates in our memory cafe. So I do help with a support group and help facilitate. And those caregivers that are caring for a spouse or a parent or loved one, friend with dementia, they need engagement. They need to have engagement, social stimulation, and be around people. Maybe not necessarily all the time, but if they're just sitting at home watching TV and not stimulating their brain, their dementia is it's going to get worse.
Progress more quickly, basically.
Mhm. It
And
is,
and
unfortunately.
the other thing too is what we determine as stimulation. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, I did a crossword puzzle," or my mom loves to do crossword puzzles. She'll that'll help. My dad wanted my mom to learn how to do crossword puzzles, and I said, "Dad, that's not how this disease works." The bottom line is that amyloid proteins form amyloid plaques, and they cloud the ability for the brain to function, and it kills off brain cells, and that's the problem. So the key thing here is bigger things like going out to a concert and having a conversation with another person, learning a new language even, or learning how to play a new card game. I have several clients who do that, try to learn new card games. And sometimes they just make up the rules, right? Like they'll say, okay, the rules for this time are we're going to play an open hand. And, if the one person can't remember, then they just let it slide. It comes down to doing something to stay engaged versus staying at home and watching TV and petting the dog. And by the way, with the pets, the other challenge is that if pets don't get fed, or they get fed more than they're supposed to, which is what usually happens. I mean, you don't remember if you fed the dog or not. There's issues with that as well. So that kind of slides us into, what if you're a family member? Because I think Krista mentioned that, if you end up in public care and you're nowhere near your family, what happens to your family members? What unexpected roles might they be in? What do you think, Paige?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I mean, Pam, you and I are in this every day. So we know it's how we're trying to educate families to make sure that they understand that there are some roles that might be coming up, but also you setting your wishes aside on what you want and identifying who you want as your power of attorney for healthcare if and when something happens to you. To make those decisions. I work with so many families that have family members out of town, and they are very busy. They're working. They're not physically capable of being here. So, we look at, okay, well, do you want to move them to the state that you're in? Or we have a lot of family members that are moving their parents here from the East Coast, and moving them here to be closer to family, because the adult children are having to step into roles to help care for their parent and make those decisions.
Well, and Sandra just said that, she's in that situation, and, thumbs up and pat on the back to you, Sandra, for starting that process, because, you've got to look at your options, right? So I know, this is going to come as a surprise, because I know both the adult children and the parents are saying, I'll just live with my daughter, and I have 3 sons and a daughter, and I'll just live with them. Well, 1, did they sign up for it? 2, what are you going to do? Move every 2 to 3 months amongst each of the kids? That's terrible for so many reasons, but especially for someone who's starting to have memory loss and inhibition. They're in a situation where they can't find the bathroom if you keep moving it by changing the environment. Moving is a very difficult thing for someone, even in the earliest stages of dementia. So you've got to think about, okay, we want to keep them in a place if possible. Sometimes it doesn't work out. That's okay. But for the most part, you want to pick some place where this person can age and be comfortable, know the caregivers, know the staff, know where the restaurant is, or the dining area, where, just be acclimated. And that's so important. And so that assumption that, you're going to live with family, or that they need to be close to family, just like your aunt. That's why we started the story off with your aunt, is to say, she wanted to be near you, and you guys are close, and that makes sense. I even know adult children who have considered moving to a place they don't want to live in order to be close to their parents, because that's what they feel they should do. I did it. I moved 3,000 miles away from California, where I had a great job, and I moved back to New Hampshire so I could be near my parents, because they needed my support. Are you guys willing to do that? You got to decide, and these are the things that, here you're sitting here in your 40s and 50s, maybe early 60s, and you're not thinking about that. Or if you are thinking about it, are you looking at all the options, which is what the truth about living at home as we age needs to be, is looking at all the options.
My dad had it ended up being really good, but my dad was 85, and I said, Dad, we got to start thinking about, we got the advanced directives. He chose me to, be his directive if something happened to him. But he wasn't going anywhere, and he wanted to stay at home. And I did my darndest to do everything I could to keep him at home. And luckily he was able to, but he fell, and then fell again, went into the hospital, ended up getting COVID, and just declined. He didn't pass away from COVID, but because of his age, and he was already aging, and he wasn't the most healthy man. And it just, the complications of the COVID, he just deteriorated. So I was able to get him at home with some home care and hospice. So, but he wasn't around for very long, but he was able to be at home, but he was not going. And he said, oh no, I don't need I'm leaving my house to you and Parker, my son. And I said, Dad, we're going to need your house to pay for your care if you need care down the road. And he said, oh no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to die at home in my sleep. And I said, okay. All right, Dad. Okay, we're going to go with that. So, we just don't always know. We just don't know. So it's having that contingency plan in place, because Pam and I deal with families that are always in crisis mode. It's like, oh my gosh, my mom walked outside. She almost got into, a busy street. She's wandering the neighborhood. She's confused. She's not eating, losing weight. And we've got to get her into a place, that's usually where
a safe place for her to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the other aspect of that, in understanding the truth about living at home is your dad passed away in his home, right? Or did he
Mhm.
end? Okay, so he got his wish,
He did,
and
but he was only
one
there
of
for 2 weeks.
right,
So,
but
yeah.
the thing that we have to remember as adult children, having lived this and my mom never wanted to live in a care community, and she spent 8 years in one. It broke my heart every day, not because the community wasn't a nice community. The issue was more that I knew she didn't want to be there, but there was no choice. They couldn't live alone. They weren't eating properly. She just recovered from colon cancer. So these are the things that we want you to think about. And granted, they're not uplifting, but to look at the possibilities, and you can broad brush them, right? You don't have to say cancer or mobility issues or a fall, but instead to say, okay, if this weren't to work out quite the way we expect,
Right.
what would we do? Would one of us move and live near mom and dad? Would we
Right.
move mom and dad closer to one of us? Who would it be? Because that's when I have a group of siblings, there's usually a tug and a pull, like, I want mom near me. Well, I want mom near me. And they live like 1,000 miles apart. And so having this dialogue now is really the most important part about this, is to start the conversation and talk about the possibilities. And then, like your dad, if he wanted to pass it home, God love you. You were back in Kansas all the time, flying back and forth as his condition worsened.
Yeah.
And now that's the next question to the audience is, would you do that? Do you
Right.
have the funds to fly back and forth? Or is it actually cheaper to get an apartment there and stay there until the passing happens? But the person gets to decide, to some degree. Now, I always get the question, well, what if they have dementia? Do they get to decide then? And that's why we talked about the beginning of having your healthcare power of attorney, your advanced directives, and your durable power of attorney for finances and your mental health. 30 states require, well, no, they don't require it, but 30 states have a mental health, it's called a psychiatric advance directive, had. And because that tells the behavioral health people what the wishes are of that individual. All this stuff has to be put in place sooner than later, because if we don't do that, then you're guessing and you're making an already difficult situation that much harder. And that is why Paige and I are here, is to ensure that you have a better or the best possible journey that you can have. Right, Paige?
Absolutely. And just giving you scenarios of stories that we've walked through so you can maybe avoid it or help you as time goes on, as we all age, and yourself or your loved one or your spouse. I'm working with two families right now that they're caregivers for their spouse. They're in their 70s, and one has dementia, the other one does not, and they don't have their advanced directives in order. So they don't have the healthcare power of attorney. And the wife needs to move, looking to possibly move her husband, or at least get some sort of care, respite care, adult day care for her husband. And to get him entered into that type of program, there needs to be an advanced directive in place, and there's not. And unfortunately, she's going to have to go to an attorney, and she's going to have to go to, guardianship, conservatorship route, which is a whole nother, it's a whole nother route. So we stress to you, if you don't have your advanced directives in order, please get that stuff done, because it can really cause a lot of problems, and you're jumping through a million hoops if and when something happens. So,
Guardianship, conservatorship, all that
not
stuff
fun.
starts to come into play, legal fees. I mean, it can get ugly. I'm sorry to say. It's
It
so
can.
much better. And plus, when you're talking to someone who's cognitively capable, they're going to say, this is what I want. This is absolutely what I want. Here's what I don't want. as opposed to, an estate attorney gets to decide whether that person who's been diagnosed with dementia can even sign a piece of paper. So
Yeah.
that's the scenario you're in right now with that client, and it's rough. So I apologize if there was some confusion about what we were going to talk about today, but hopefully those of you who have remained here, which is most of you, have found this valuable. It's given you some food for thought for aging in place, and how you're going to handle, those 4 flights of stairs. How are you going to handle if you can't drive for one reason or another? I mean, and by the way, that's not a mental thing. If you break your foot, guess what? You're not driving. If you break an arm, you're not driving. If you break a hip, you're not driving. So, what happens to you then? And that's really what we wanted to do, is start that conversation, get those wheels moving to have that conversation. So thank you all for attending. We appreciate it.
And Krista, you are right. Getting your plan B, it sounds like you touring communities and at least going out and looking, because there are places that do have wait lists. So you're smart to be ahead of the game. And hey, there's nothing wrong with going and looking, so you're doing the right thing. So
yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys again. I'm glad you found it helpful. Paige,
thank you all for joining.
Are here if you have independent or other questions about that are private, that you want to reach out to us. I'm at Pam at itsnotthatsimple.com, or you can go to my website, alzheimersfamilyconsulting.com. Paige, how do they reach you?
I've got mine coming in right now. Here's my information. You can call me direct. And we'd be happy to be a lifesaver for you, or at least get you in the right direction if you're struggling with anything. So
please don't head out to Quora or Reddit or Facebook groups. Paige and I have lived through a lot, and I think it's important. You wouldn't go to your dentist if you needed a cardiologist. It's really important to get advice from people who live this every day and who have worked with hundreds of people. So, it's fine if you go out there and ask questions, but validate that information, please, with a professional. So thank you again. When we will see you next month. When, are you ready? The topic is dementia care do's and don'ts. We hear these all the time, and I don't think there'll be any confusion about what we're talking about.
Yes.
Thank you again. You guys take care.
Thank you all for joining. Bye. Bye.